What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with my Week 14 tight end rankings. The most difficult position in fantasy football to try and figure out on a weekly basis. So as I've been telling you for the last several weeks, we're keeping it simple, all right? That's what we're doing here with our rankings, and that's what we're doing with our start and sit advice. If we've got guys in good positions that are seeing volume, that the opportunity is there every single week, those are the guys that we just need to trust, because outside of 2 tight ends right now, maybe 3, there's not really a whole lot of guys that we can trust. We just have to plug guys in every single week with the best chances, cross our fingers, maybe hope a little bit as well. So let's jump into it, and we're going to talk about my top 20 tight ends, starting at number 20 with Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee playing on, Thursday. I almost said Monday Night Football. I'm a little bit behind there. Playing on Thursday Night Football. Game is not done as of yet, as of this recording, but I had him at 20 going into that game. Last time I looked, he had about 30 yards. Not bad, but the Rams are starting to get up on New England a little bit. He may not end up finishing with over 10 half PPR points by this is all said and done, but we'll keep an eye on that, and of course we'll talk about it more next week if we have to change our thought process on Tyler Higbee at all. Cole Kmet at number 19, looking like he's kind of taking over for Jimmy Graham as that tight end one. A good game last week. I'm not ready to jump on board as of yet. It's only one good game for Cole Kmet. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll try and figure out as we go through the process over the next couple of weeks, is Cole Kmet really a guy that can kind of help you win your fantasy leagues? I mean, he's had double-digit double-digit yards only twice this year. His 7 targets were the most in a game last week. His 5 receptions were most in a game last week. I'm just not ready to jump on board as of yet. But like I said, we'll continue to monitor that, and we'll let you know in the coming weeks whether or not we can try and get him into our lineups. Dalton Schultz coming in at number 18. Dalton Schultz is a guy that, he showed some promise at different points this year, but if we're really banking on 4 receptions and about 40 yards from him, that's just never going to be enough to get him into the start conversation. Again, good for the tight ends in Green Bay. Good for the tight ends. I'm looking at the thumbnail for the video right now, which is Robert Tonyan. I've got that sitting off to the right-hand side of me. I look at it as I'm talking and I say Green Bay. My bad. The tight ends for Dallas start off well, but they just haven't really shown a whole lot of upside. And of course, the Dak Prescott injury does a lot for that. Zach Ertz at number 17, not ready to start Zach Ertz again at this point either. Dallas Goedert is going to be a start for me. He's just been way too good. Last week, Ertz comes back, 4 targets, 2 receptions, and 31 yards. They might be slowly trying to work him back a little bit.Maybe he's still just not fully healthy. Whatever it may be, he only saw 27 snaps last week, which is 44% of the offensive snaps. The last time he played in week 6, when he went down with that injury, he was at 67 percentage for his snaps. And then every week 1 through 5, he was at 85, 94, 92, 95, 95. So typically he's a guy that plays a whole lot of snaps. Didn't really do that this week. So again, they might be just, slowly working him back a little bit. So we'll continue to monitor that as well. There's just a whole lot of monitoring with this position right now, keeping an eye on different things, seeing if it works out or not. For Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert is still a start for me, but Zach Ertz is not as of right now. Hayden Hurst, he's there because he plays in an offense that passes the ball quite a bit, and we would love to jump on board with him more, but we can't. I mentioned it in my start and sit video that I was highly critical of Hayden Hurst coming into the season. Quite honestly, I may have been one of the lowest people on him in the industry. I mean, he was a very popular pick to be like a top 10 tight end this year, and I just wasn't on board with it. Did not love his opportunity because I didn't believe he was going to be used in the same way Austin Hooper was used last season. I mean, he doesn't have a game over 100 yards yet. He has 1 game with 7 receptions, 1 with 6, and other than that, his high is 5, but he's got a lot of 3, 1, 2. I mean, it's all over the place as of right now. So going up against the Chargers, you'd like to see him maybe get a little bit more work against the Chargers, but I'm not ready to call him a start this week. And more than likely for the rest of the season, we're going to be moving on from him. I definitely think that you should be looking at other options. One of those options will be coming up here in just a second. In number 15, Austin Hooper, another guy I was critical of before the season started. And, he just hasn't delivered. And one of the reasons that I was critical of him before the season started is because I thought basically they were paying him, which they did pay him quite a bit, but they were paying him more to not be a receiving weapon, but to come in and be like an extension of that offensive line. Austin Hooper is an excellent blocker, does really well on the offensive line, but he wasn't going to be utilized in Cleveland the way that he was utilized, in Atlanta last year. Now, prior to him having that emergency appendectomy, we saw an uptick in his usage in weeks 4, 5, and 6, 7, 10, and 6 targets. 5 receptions in each of those. I thought maybe some of that upside was coming. Since he's come back from that appendectomy, though, his targets have been 2, 5, 2, and 2. And even last week in a game against Minnesota where they're throwing the ball an awful lot, Baker Mayfield was all over the place. They just didn't go to him very often. So Austin Hooper is a start for me this week because they're going up against Baltimore, and likely the wide receivers are going to have a really tough matchup this week. So for me, Baker Mayfield's probably going to have to throw the ball quite a bit. Still, I'm thinking that Austin Hooper can be a guy that he takes a look at. On the lower end of the start spectrum here, again, any of these other guys with a little bit higher upside, I'm taking over him right now. But hopefully we see some of that volume that he saw prior to having that appendectomy. Drew Sample at number 14. Drew Sample's a guy that I said was going to be making an appearance a little bit higher on these start and sit videos and rankings videos. And after last week's 7 target, 7 reception performance, I definitely think that we're headed in that direction. This week, he gets the Dallas defense that is softer than the butter that you left sitting by the stove overnight. So we're, and the reason I say that is because some people are weird and let their butter sit out, which is, no, you put your butter in the refrigerator, people, okay? You're a psycho. If you're leaving your butter on the counter, okay? If you leave your butter on the counter, let me know in the comments below. And that it's just gross. It's just gross. But I want to see how many people do it. Okay, back to the fantasy football talk here. Got a little sidetracked there for a second. Drew Sample going up against a nice defensive matchup for him. Could end up, again, on the lower end of the start spectrum here, but still, if he can get into our 7-7-49, maybe if he can find the end zone, maybe if he can get more like 60 yards or so, he's going to be right around that area. Logan Thomas at number 13. Boy, does the Logan Thomas coming out party very, very exciting last week for some people. A lot of people before the season started, again, Logan Thomas was kind of a dark horse for them. The former Virginia Tech quarterback was with Detroit last season, didn't do a whole lot. And this year, he's been doing much more than that. Especially last week, 9, 98. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. They're utilizing him all over the field right now. He's taking some direct snaps and running with the football. He's throwing the football a little bit. He's kind of all over the place. Now, San Francisco does allow the least amount of fantasy points to opposing tight ends at 8.23 points. So it is going to be a tough matchup, and that's why you see him all the way down here at number 13. But they've been looking his way quite often, especially since Alex Smith took over, and it's hard to overlook that. Number 12, Noah Fant. Noah Fant, the up and down. He's dealt with different quarterbacks this season. He's dealt with suspended quarterbacks this season, which led to having no quarterback. He's dealt with some injuries around. Last week, we're back to those targets that we were used to seeing. 7 targets, 4 receptions, and he tied his second highest receiving total this year with 57 yards going up against Kansas City. Carolina gives up over 13 fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So definitely could see Noah Fant making a nice little splash this week coming in at number 12. Mike Gesicki at number 11. As I said in my start and sit video, Mike Gesicki is like the perfect weapon for Tua. But they need to be utilizing him as such. And I feel like maybe last week we kind of saw that happen. One thing I said about, the Dolphins offense last week is that nothing against Devontae Parker. I mean, he's a fine receiver. Yeah, it took him a while to break out. I'm not a huge fan of his unless Ryan Fitzpatrick is under center. He's not the type of, athletic playmaker that Mike Gesicki is. I mean, Mike Gesicki is an athlete in a tight end's body. I mean, the dude, he doesn't play like a tight end. He can do a lot of things athletically. He can do a lot of things after the catch that set a quarterback up for success. And when you play the tight end position and you find yourself in this type of a role and you have this type of a skill set, you really find yourself in a lot of mismatches. But you got to get the targets. You got to get the looks. The start of the season, Mike Gesicki in week 2, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 130 yards, and 1 touchdown. when you get Mike Gesicki the targets, Mike Gesicki, he comes through. I mean, he always comes through. 11 targets, he has 130 yards. In some of these other games, 5 targets, 30, 3 targets, 15, 3 targets, 15. Then he gets 6 targets, he has 91 yards. 2 targets, 0, 2 targets, 8, 442, 540, 543, 535, 11 targets, 88 yards. So when you get him the ball, when you make him a main part of your offense, he puts up numbers. He puts up numbers because he's such a mismatch nightmare when he gets lined up, especially if he lines up in the slot. There's no slot cornerbacks in the league, for the most part, that can really keep up and deal with Mike Gesicki's athleticism and that mismatch he is. For a majority of linebackers in the league, if they get put on him, they're not going to be able to keep up with him either. So they got to give him those opportunities. They got to put him in a position to make plays after the catch. They got to put him in a position to see that volume, to really utilize him in that offense to get those wins. So hopefully they have found something here and they continue to work through it. Because again, when he gets the volume, everything's there for him. You just got to keep feeding him. Number 10, Dallas Goedert. The Zach Ertz return last week was a little bit of a scare for Dallas Goedert owners who had really liked what they had seen from him over the last few weeks. I mean, he comes back in week 10. He gets 6 targets. He comes back in week 8. 1 target, 15 yards. They get the bye. And then every week since that bye, 6 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets. So he's been seeing that. His yards per reception, he's been making some big plays. 15, 10, 13. Over the last 3 weeks, 77 yards, 75 yards, 66 yards. Touchdowns in week 11 and 12. Still going with him at number 10, even with Zach Ertz back right now. Because again, I talked about it with Zach Ertz. Maybe that snap percentage is down. Last week, Goddard's snap percentage did drop to 84% after being 93, 100, and 100 the 3 weeks before. But still, even though he played 84% of the snaps, that's still really, really good. A lot of tight ends aren't seeing that type of play right now. 84%, and then he got 7 targets. So even with Ertz being back, we'll keep looking at Ertz if they keep getting him on the field a little bit more as he comes back from this injury. We'll see what happens. Part of the thing is maybe they want to keep him healthy. Maybe they do. Maybe it's one of those things where they want to move on from him. They want to know exactly what they have with Dallas Goedert. So we'll see what happens. But for right now, Dallas Goedert he's going to be on the lower end of the rankings here. He's still going to be a start for me, though, unless something happens to change that. Rob Gronkowski at number 9. I mean, he's going to be a pretty safe bet to see some decent targets every single week. But you have to know going into it that you're going to have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin above him in the target hierarchy. But he does have 6 targets in week 11 and 7 targets in week 12. Now, week 11 probably would have been a lot better, but he only caught 2 of those 6 targets. Last week, he caught 6 of his 7 targets. But he's been a little bit up and down with that. 2 out of 6. And then back in week 9, 1 out of 6. 5 out of 8, 5 out of 8, 3 out of 6, 1 out of 3. So he's had a little bit of trouble with that catch percentage this year. If we can stay right around those 7 targets and he catches 5 or 6 of them, he is probably going to be right around that 70 to 100 yard mark. So you can keep rolling him out there. Again, kind of like I said with Dallas Goedert, maybe that upside's a little bit on the lower end right now. But if he does, if he gets you a touchdown, he's going to be a pretty good bet to crack 10 fantasy points. Eric Ebron, man, it's Eric Ebron is frustrating. And someone made a comment in the video the other day. Oh, he found something to hate on Eric Ebron again. Well, listen, I watched Eric Ebron in Detroit for several years. He wasn't that great. I mean, his breakout year finally in 2018 when he scored 13 touchdowns was because someone finally utilized him and understood that, hey, he's not going to be, the game-breaking tight end that's going to put up 1,000 yards. He's not Travis Kelce. He's not Darren Waller. He's not, George Kittle. He's not all these top-end tight ends. I mean, he's a guy that can work well in the red zone, and you can give him targets, but you have to understand that those targets are going to come with some issues, and that is that catch percentage. He blanks sometimes. You can see it when he plays. It's like he just mentally he's there, but he just maybe blanks, or maybe the situation. Maybe he has a little bit of trouble of keeping up with the game speed at times, things of that nature. But over the last couple of weeks, he's got 11 targets. He's only caught 7 of those. That catch percentage is down near 63. The week before that, he only caught 4 of 7. He caught 2 of 6, 3 of 6. You know, 4 of 5 is good, 6 of 8, 2 of 4, 5 of 6, 5 of 7, but then 3 of 5. So that catch percentage, you know, there are just certain plays where it looks like, I don't want to say he takes them off because I don't believe that to be true at all. I don't really, there's not very many football players that I say that guy's taking a play off. These guys go out there and they play their hearts out. They love this game. But there are just some plays where it's like, man, you know, that was a bad drop, or you could have done a little bit more, or maybe you just cut the route off a little bit too much, or something along those lines. I think that happens too much with Eric Ebron. But again, when you've got 11 targets over the last 2 weeks, I think we got to kind of follow that right now. And that's where that kind of goes back to that KISS, right? That keep it simple, stupid with tight ends right now. He's getting volume. If he's getting volume, we got to play him. So yeah, I'm going to nitpick at him, but you're going to play him because he's getting targets, and that's all that matters right now. At number 7, Evan Ingram, you know, kind of let us down last week, but keep in mind, he still led that team in targets last week. All right. It sounds like Daniel Jones could end up being back this week. Even if it's Colt McCoy, you know, still 8 targets last week. But since week 7, 9, 10, 10. Yep, he had 3 in week 10 against Philadelphia, but then back to 9 and then 8 again. So the targets are there. And again, ladies and gentlemen, keep it simple, stupid. If the targets are there, we're going to follow the targets. If you don't like it, hopefully you've got one of these guys above them. If you've got someone else you trust more, then run with that as well. Hunter Henry, same thing. Hunter Henry's looking a lot better over the last several weeks. Last week was a bad week for everybody that played in a powder blue uniform. That was just awful. But in the weeks leading up to that, he's been a guy, the volume is still there. I said as soon as the touchdowns come, he's going to be more than fantasy viable, and those touchdowns started to come. And then he had a 67-yard game against Buffalo, and now he gets Atlanta, who has a lot of trouble stopping tight ends, over 15 fantasy points per game. Expect Hunter Henry to get back on track. I feel like I did a pretty good breakdown on Robert Tonyan the other day on my start sit video, and kind of what Bob Tonyan is doing right now. The way that they're utilizing him in this offense is spectacular. And if you missed it, I'm not going to go into it too much because the video is starting to get a little long as it is anyway. If you want to hear more about why Robert Tonyan saw so much success since the wide receiver 2s have come back, go listen to that video, and I'm going to break down why he has been so successful. I believe that's going to continue against Detroit this week, though. I got him at number 5. Number 4, Mark Andrews. He's my must-have or my must-start tight end this week. He's got the Cleveland Browns, who allow 16 fantasy points to opposing tight ends, the second most in the league, only to the New York Jets. Definitely rolling with him this week. Last week, it looked like they were really trying to pass the ball a little bit more. Lamar Jackson looked a little bit more comfortable. Again, it's a very soft Dallas defense, but Cleveland has, some blips on the radar where they also continue to be a little bit too soft and they give up too big of plays. That's Mark Andrews for you to help you out. TJ Hawkinson at number 3. TJ Hawkinson continues to be a great volume threat every single week with no Kenny Golladay. And last week is finally a week where I saw them utilize him to the best of his abilities. Absolutely love seeing it against Chicago. Hopefully they can keep that up. And then, of course, you got Darren Balls to the Waller, the dude dropping 200 yards on you last week. Travis Kelce at number 1 overall. You got those guys. You play them every single week. No exceptions. No questions asked. You got them. You play them. If you got 2 of them, play one in the flex. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate you tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Got my top 20 tight ends for you here. Leave me a comment down below if you got a question about anybody maybe it wasn't mentioned. If you have start or sit questions, follow the rankings. If you look at it and you're like, hey, should I play this guy or this guy? If one guy's higher, you go with that guy. And then also, if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and become a part of Headliner Nation today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this episode. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.